Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News Podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and him, Mr. Editor Extraordinaire, the one and the only Gavin Harper. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, very well, Bruce. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. You had a bit of a shocker at the weekend, eh?
I think that would be putting it mildly. I was at the Edinburgh game on Friday night with you, and then
I know,
home.
and you didn't want to talk to me after because you were buzzing away trying to hit your deadline and get home to your bed, and then
Alarm went 4 o'clock on Saturday morning. Made it to Edinburgh Airport for about back of 5. And as I walked through duty free into departures, there was pinged my phone and up popped the EasyJet app to tell me that my flight had been delayed by a grand total of 9 hours, which got worse and worse and worse. And I ended up not making the flight to Belfast to see Glasgow play Ulster. Yes, all in all, not the most successful of Saturday afternoons, I must confess.
No, but you got on top of a lot of life admin while you were sitting in the airport. So, and you spoke to me how many times? 2, 3 times?
Probably 3 at least. Yeah, I made a lot of phone calls. I would say that.
Aye.
Yeah,
People going, I've not heard from him for a long time.
it was one of those afternoons. It was it was pretty frustrating all in all. But look, we can laugh about it now. Thankfully, I wasn't doing much laughing on Saturday afternoon.
You were quite an angry man. But I tell you what, frustrating. Like both teams close, but no cigar.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that try by Matt Scott at the end of the Edinburgh game probably glossed the score for them a wee bit. I felt like when Leinster needed to, they went through the gears and actually made it look pretty easy, worryingly, for about 15 minutes in the second half. But, you know, I've criticised Edinburgh before for kind of falling away in games, and actually to stick at it and pick up that second losing bonus point with Matt's try right at the end. You know, we keep saying if they're mid-table by the end of 4 runs, that might be a success. So look, they've got 2 points. It's a start. It's not what they would have wanted it from a home game, and I'm sure we'll talk about, but they've obviously got a tough ass this weekend. And Glasgow, I think Glasgow were really unlucky. I think they probably will feel like they should have won that. They were good for an hour, and ultimately Ulster's bench made a big difference. Glasgow's probably disappointed a wee bit, and there was a bit of contention about the decision to Dave Shanahan's try at the end. But look, these things, Glasgow won a league on and had luck on their side in some decisions, so I'm sure these things will all play out over the course of the season.
Aye, well, you'd like to think. Some coaches didn't think that. The Glasgow one, the 6-2 bench, and then you don't use one of the two, is an interesting sort of tactical bit. Franco's very much his own man, and this 6-2 bench is becoming. In fact, it's probably disappearing as a talking point because it's becoming so common. But to then not use one of your two, it was a pretty experienced backline, and there was a bit of flexibility there. But when you're going into that final quarter and you maybe need something, like you said about the bench, but there wasn't anything on the bench really to, Adam Hastings came on, but more maybe a necessity rather than a luxury.
Yeah, I also felt like that was a strange one because Adam coming on at 10 then meant Tom Jordan moved to 12, Sione moved to 13, and to be honest, Glasgow had lost control of the game by that point, and it felt like, Adams played a lot at 15. I was sitting, albeit in the house, watching, thinking, Glasgow maybe could do another kicking option here, like shoving Josh Mackay on a wing and putting Adam back at 15 might not be the worst to give you that, because they just couldn't get out their own half. They just were totally under the pump by that point, and I kind of get why he didn't put Afshar on. I think for all that Ben Afshar's a really promising player, would you want to chuck somebody in who's got that little experience to a game that's so tight? At Ravenhill, I think it's a big ask to come on and claim the flow.
There's also Dobie plays well. Like Dobie's a class operator, and why change it? And so then we're on. Are they finishers or are they replacements? Like, is Ben only going on if the game's either way, won or lost, or Dobie gets injured? And we've spoken about benches for Scotland and how, what do you do with Finn Russell? You need a 10, but you only need them in case of emergency. Xander is kind of like that, although you would like to have the Glasgow forwards. We were talking just before we came on air. So Kev Miller, top of the moon on Twitter, the 6 Glasgow Warriors forwards who were replaced made 66 tackles, which is 16 tackles per 80 minutes. The 6 forwards that came on made 121 tackles, which is the equivalent to 54 tackles per 80 minutes. 54 tackles in a game. That's 3 careers for me.
And the rest.
That's 54 tackles. So Glasgow, that would suggest Glasgow didn't touch a ball.
Yeah, and I think that's basically about right for the last quarter of the game. The 2 yellow cards didn't help. I think that invited even more pressure on themselves. But look, for the first 50 minutes, it looked like Glasgow from last season. It looked like they were going to go there, they were going to score 4 tries, come away with 5 points, and all was rosy. What worried me about it was Rory Dard scored a try that was chalked off Ross Thompson, a forward pass. And all too often we've seen from Scotland, that flips the momentum, and then they haven't been able to, I think of the Italy game in Rome, they weren't able to wrestle that momentum back, and it was almost a carbon copy. And Franco tried his best by unloading the forward replacements, and then obviously making a change at 10, but they just couldn't stop it. I mean, Ulster were basically relentless at that point.
And that's where I think you describe that Ulster performance as a professional performance. They did what they had to do to win. Still on the tackle stats, Rory Darge, who I worry about his length of career, 39 tackles. And Gregor Hiddleston made 27, and he was only on the pitch for 26 minutes.
Yeah, like the idea that you've made 1 tackle every minute, a tackle a minute for every minute you've been on the pitch as a sub, is like, it just shows that they had absolutely no ball. And
it also shows you how the game's changed, because the ball's in play more. I don't know the stat for ball in play, but to make that number of tackles, that's a lot. That's not scrum time or catch and drive maul time. That's ball in play, properly in play for a lot of the time. And that's no wonder there's now 6 forwards on the bench if they're getting through that work rate.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I mean, Darges was some effort to make 39 tackles in a game and still not be all-time top of your. Johnny Gray made 42. Glasgow beat Leinster a few years ago. But like, those are unbelievable numbers. Like some coaches would say, if you got to 150, I think is about average. 200 in a game is considered massive. I think Glasgow were over 300. So, like, it just shows that. And I think that's probably a sense of the frustration is that they came so close to winning the game. But, they'll be annoyed that effort kind of wasn't rewarded.
And it's bonkers because it's what you do with the ball, obviously. So Ulster had a lot of possession and the score was so tight. So I don't know what it says. You could flip that coin either way. Either Glasgow were pretty ruthless when they had the ball because they didn't have it very often, or Glasgow need to spend a bit more time on the ball, or maybe that's just the game. We're just going to batter you, and we know we're going to get there in the end. But the relentlessness of the URC, the thought of, you know, Benetton for Glasgow on Friday night, that's a sizable challenge now. Olden days, you would have looked at that and thought, right, we can rest a few boys and we can do that. And Benetton, no chance now. I mean, that squad they've assembled is very good.
Yeah, I think gone are the days when the Italian teams, or any team really, should be seen as, oh, that's a guaranteed 5 points. You know, let's not worry. But the interesting point is that the resting players, because, you know, we talked last week about the Scotland guys can't play 5 games in a row. So Franco's going to have to manage them all throughout the season. And I imagine there'll be a fair bit of chopping and changing, especially the first sort of 4 or 5 weeks. So, yeah, I would expect, you know, I think Peter Murchie said earlier in the week that they expect to have Jack Dempsey back, Scott Cummings is likely back, Hugh Jones is another week away. So they're not a million miles away from getting all their Scotland internationals back. But, yeah, I still think that there'll be an element of drip feeding them into the team over the next kind of couple of weeks before they probably hit European stuff and these Edinburgh games, before they're you know, picking basically an international team.
I'm pleased Adam Hastings got on. I was, you know, we spoke about this last week about trying to pick the teams, and I got to speak to Sean Everett on Friday after the game and said there's no way that would have been the 15 I would have picked that you picked, and he had his reasons for that, and we'll maybe come on to it. But I thought Adam Hastings might have started potentially because of the period of time he's been through with his Auntie Jenny. It was maybe a decision that he's good enough to be there, but maybe we bring him on and we see if he can make an impact. He must be in that rotation, so there's surely, I would think he'll start this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly, you know, without knowing the Glasgow team, I would think so. I would think purely from the point of view that, you know, he's, like we talked about Ross Thompson at length last week. Adam's not come back to Glasgow to sit on the bench every week. So I expect that there might be some rejigging of the midfield. Tom Jordan might get another go at 12. And we see Adam at 10. I think it has obviously been an incredibly difficult few weeks for him, for all the Hastings family. I think he spoke earlier in the week about it and about his Auntie Jenny incredibly well. An incredibly difficult thing, I imagine, for him to do. You know, so yeah, I think that'll all play into Franco's thinking about how best to manage the person before the player. But I think, yeah, I would be surprised, put it this way, I would be surprised if we don't see Adam Hastings getting a lengthier run out on Friday night.
Yeah, and fair play, because Adam spoke really highly of Glasgow and Franco and looking after him through that period, and as you say, looking after him rather than a rugby player. I was there on Sunday at Jenny's service. It was absolutely unbelievable. Jenny would have absolutely loved it. It was so packed full of positivity and smiles and laughter, and there was obviously a lot of tears too. But I don't think you would have had much change out of 800 folk there. It was absolutely unbelievable. I spoke to Adam for a wee bit, and he was pretty positive about things. I think he's keen to get back on the horse, and as they all are, as the whole family are. But there's a lot of memories there for them. Friday night at the Hive, there was some real glimpses of positivity there, especially just before half time where Jamie Ritchie got a turnover. It was 12-all. If Edinburgh had conceded a try there, you go in at half-time, 19-12 down, it's a different game. Jamie Ritchie goes for a turnover, it goes in at 12-all. I thought that's one of those moments where you think, it's maybe the day. It's maybe the day. And you mentioned it earlier, Leinster for about 50 minutes just seemed like everything they touched turned to gold.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I mean, like we talked about when Glasgow's run the URC final, Matt Fagerson in Thomond Park really stood up to Peter O'Mahony, and there was an incident. I know he ended up giving away a penalty. There was an incident where he sort of stood up and he shoved O'Mahony, and there was a bit of back and forward, and I thought that encapsulated the change in Glasgow from we love to throw it about, happy to play from anywhere, but can be a bit of a soft touch, to actually proving they've got the credentials to go and do what they did and win the URC. That Jamie Ritchie moment felt like the same, the Edinburgh equivalent, and it was just like it gave the whole crowd a lift going into half time. They were level. Probably most folk didn't expect them to be level at half time, and then I think the disappointing thing was Edinburgh have these moments, and they all too often they just slip away. In that first 10-15 minutes of the second half, Leinster just blew them away. And that was, and the concern for me, and I've said it on social media on Friday night, the concern for me is that was a Leinster team minus 7 or 8, 9 Ireland internationals, plus RG Sneeman, plus Geordie Barrett. And, that was
Geordie Barrett's got a sore one. Geordie Barrett might not see much rugby. He's got a sore one. He was on the flight on crutches.
I did see that. Saying the talk that from New Zealand that he might be out till certainly November or something like that. But yeah, look, apart from Buffelli, that was Edinburgh's best, and I worry that they gave it their best against I want to call it makeshift Leinster, because they were a very good team, but a Leinster team with plenty more still to come, and Edinburgh still fell short. And as I said, right at the start,
I get what you mean, but Edinburgh, in fairness, have still got players to come back, and there was bits that were definitely improved.
I totally agree with. To be
the disappointing thing for me, and I think, and I spoke to Sean about this, they're now away to South Africa, where there's a lot of time together for some conversations, there's a lot of new things in there, new coach, some new players. There's a bit to go. It's a tough place to go and think that that's where you're going to build stuff, because you've got 2 really tough games. But there were definite bits of progress. Sean was frustrated because they had 37% territory, and having built the kicking game last year, Sean, with a smile on his face, said, we scored 5 tries and we lost. I would rather we won 6-3, and that sort of classic. But and I get what he means, but it's going to take a wee bit of time, and only having one pre-season game where really it was a 40-minute game for 2 teams, that there is going to have to be some building during the season.
Yeah, I think to balance the point I was making earlier, I think there were signs, or there were glimpses certainly of things to be positive about. I thought when Edinburgh did get on the ball, Mosesi Tuipulotu caused Leinster a bit of bother. I thought Duhan looked more like the Duhan you see playing for Scotland than the Duhan that played for Edinburgh last season. They didn't, and that's purely because they struggled to get him the ball. I think, to Sean's point about territory, Ali Price didn't have a great night. He sort of sclaffed one box kick up in the air and then bought a terrible dummy for one of Leinster's tries. Ross Thompson's first kick was not a good one, and he actually said after the game, "Look, when I watch this back, I think I'll be pretty disappointed with the way we managed the game." I don't think it was necessarily a night for Edinburgh to say, the rain was coming down pretty hard. I don't think it was a night to say, look, let's just go and chuck it about from everywhere. Darcy didn't really get that involved. When he did, he looked good, but look, I think they'll be disappointed with how that played out, but 37 or however many percent territory against a team like Leinster, you're always going to find that really, really difficult. I think the crumbs of comfort will come in the fact that they stayed in the fight and they escaped with 2 losing bonus points.
There was some big defensive sets that I know Sean and the club have spoken about last year was defence and kicking, but I thought against a Leinster team that, were, I know you said they weren't full Boona, but they weren't far away with some of the players that they had. And I thought Edinburgh's defence, especially in their own 22, I thought stood up better than it has in the past. I was gutted for Matt Curry. I don't know how serious that is. I was gutted when he came off. And Matt Scott was a late replacement because Boff didn't make it. I thought Matt Scott looked not young, but he looked sharp. He looked hungry. He looked, he was busy. I thought this thing of it's his last season, on what I saw on Friday night, he's got more than a season to go.
And the stadium announcers decided to give him his Sunday name. He was Matthew Scott all Friday night.
Do you know? But I call him Matthew. Like there's certain boy like Matt Curry is Matt, whereas Matthew Scott. I don't know who that guy is. He got quite excited on Friday night though.
He did, and he certainly enjoyed Cian Healy's appearance. Do
you know? But Matt Scott, like back to Matt's, Ben Velicott has that in his. I remember saying to Mike Blair after one game, because Ben took a quick tap. I can't remember who it was against. Chipped it, caught it, and scored. And it was one of those. As a coach, you're going, no, yes. And I was saying to Mike, and Mike was like, nah, I encourage him to do that. And obviously, that's Mike's a completely different beast. And when Ben took that quick tap at the end, Ben Healy had gone for that really long range effort, and then Ben Velicott does that. It was Matt Scott that was on his shoulder. It wasn't Duan or Darcy or Tuipulotu or a back rower. And Matt Scott, great line. Ben Velicott sticks him away, and I thought it was a great way to finish. And I know you're saying the scoreline may be flattered, and I probably don't disagree, but you take those things when they come. And for Edinburgh to get 2 out of that, it's not what they wanted. But last year, considering the chat was always, if we'd only got more bonus points,
Yeah,
the difference between 1 and 2 by the end of the season could be the difference between Chips and Haim at the start of April and actually getting to keep playing.
Yeah, like I totally agree. I think one of the things I thought we talked with Glasgow, talked about benches, like Ben Velicott should have been on 10 minutes into the second half. Once that game had started to go away from Edinburgh, it felt like they needed something to just flip the whole momentum of the game, and one of those Velicott quick taps might have done that, because you felt like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I felt like inside the Hive, even the crowd had sort of resigned themselves to, okay, Leinster have scored 3 tries. It's now 33-9 or 33-12 or whatever it was. Like, this game's done. And actually, Edinburgh could end up easily take 40 points here. I thought that was an odd decision, but you're right. To take 2 losing bonus points when they've been criticised for not taking bonus points last season, if you're looking for positives, that's got to be the main one. There was also, just to go back to the point about Cian Healy, I saw a great thing, in fact it was Kev Miller again, that when Cian Healy made his Leinster debut was against the Borders, and the Borders 9 and 10 were Rob Christie and Gregor Townsend. You know, and when Rob Christie ran on with the water at one stage on Friday night, I thought, like, how is a guy that played against Rob Christie still playing in the front row, like nearly 20 years later? Incredible. Like, and what a servant he's been to Irish rugby. Anyway, that's a complete aside.
No, well, it is an aside, but that's also back to how he's managed, there's a big part in how he's managed. When you're centrally contracted, you know, we've spoken about it, and Bernard Jackman spoke about that Team Ireland. Mm-hmm. It's actually more important what they do for Ireland. And this is going to sound like I'm belittling what goes on, but the point of playing for Leinster is to make Ireland strong.
Yeah.
So he's managed in the same way we're talking about Scotland internationals. Can he play 5 on the bounce? And they need to be rested. And Cian Healy, you know, what a player he is. And that, to bring somebody like that on, he maybe doesn't have 80 minutes in him anymore. But if you're the opposition and you unload somebody with that experience and that determination, that's just, give me a break. Send me a bairn, please. You know, give me some young pup I can have a crack at here instead of bringing on Cian Healy.
Yeah, I don't imagine Edinburgh's front row's eyes lit up when they saw Cian Healy and Rabat Slimani being summoned from the bench 10 minutes into the second half. Yeah, that was, you know, and that speaks to Leinster's depth and their, you know, success over the years, is that they've built so many great squads, and within that, so many good players. So,
and then they sign RG Sneeman. I thought the Edinburgh replacement front row went well. I thought Bohan came on, threw himself about, and Darcy Ray, who we've hardly seen, and I thought he showed up. Paul Hill's a good signing. You know, everybody was worried about WP. I thought Paul Hill went well. Seems like a pretty serious campaigner. Seems pretty happy. I was speaking to him after the game, and he said when he moved up for 3 weeks, he was living with Ben Muncaster. So he was going for a swim in the afternoon, coffees, long lie, you know, just enjoying life. And then now his wife and his bairns and the dog have moved up. So it's soft play, early morning dog walks. And I said, very good. You're flying to South Africa tomorrow, so you're back on 2 weeks holiday again. He's like, yeah, damn right I am. It's a tough life.
I'm sure they're making the most of 2 weeks in South Africa.
No, I thought the Edinburgh game was an interesting one. They've now got these 2 games on the bounce, which we've spoken about, and tough old shifts, and then they've got to come back to the Stormers. But Tuipulotu, you know, I knew nothing about him, absolutely nothing. I thought he went well, looked hungry, looked pretty sharp, pretty agile on his feet as well. Wants to have a little crack. We just never really quite got going, and that then means Darcy and Duhan didn't necessarily get going. And just picking up on your bit about the stadium kind of resigned itself, that's when you need a player, you know, the Jamie Ritchie turnover, the Matt Fagerson, Barney, a Darcy bit of magic, that, you know, a Ben Velicott. There needs to be something that sparks, otherwise you just get into that lull, and you're all in the lull. And it's having that, it's not necessarily a spark, because it could be just a battering ram. It can be somebody sitting them down. It can be just something to give everybody a lift. And that was where I thought we were just missing something.
Yeah, I'd probably go along with that. I think there were a couple of moments that could have been that. There's a big tackle that's doing the rounds on social media, on Edinburgh's social media channels, from Ben Muncaster on James Ryan, I think, that could have been that. But I think because Leinster were camped in Edinburgh's 22, it sort of got lost in the play. But I think, and that's why probably I would have liked to have seen Ben Velicott on sooner than he was, because it felt like, okay, we're not getting that from the 15 that are on the pitch. You know, we're not getting that kind of momentum changer. So he's somebody who's done it time and time again for Edinburgh in the past. So you think, well, give him 20 minutes rather than, I think he only got the last 12 or something. So yeah, look, it'll be interesting to see again what they do this weekend in terms of if Sean mixes it up. I imagine again they'll make changes over the next couple of weeks, because 280 minutes on the bounce in South Africa is pretty tough going.
You mentioned his name there. If I'd picked a team this time last week, Magnus Bradbury would have been at 8, because I just thought that how it went. And Ben Muncaster threw himself about. I think he hurt his knee against Gloucester. I saw his old man after the game, and he was worried because he thought it was more than it was. And then on Saturday, he just was all over the show. Absolutely all over the show, just throwing himself into things. And playing for Edinburgh means a lot to him. He's a kid that's grown up watching and supporting Edinburgh. You know, we're now at the point where we've got generations who maybe their thing wasn't first 15 for Hawick or Watsonians or Boroughmuir. It's, I want to play for Edinburgh, and I think Ben's one of them. And he was... I heard a couple of stories about how pleased he was to be named in the starting team, and he gave everything, absolutely everything. And there's a lot of competition in that 6 and 8 jersey for Scotland, and he can only just keep playing. I think you mentioned before he was the only one that's not gone on to get capped from that tour a while ago. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep that going.
And look, there's another Scotland A game against Chile now confirmed for the night before the Australia game. I think that's a perfect opportunity for somebody like him to prove himself to Gregor, because probably a lot of rugby to be played between now and the autumn internationals. But you would think that with the competition, Andy Christie scored I think twice for Saracens at the weekend. Jamie Ritchie was in good form. It's hard to see him breaking into the senior squad, but that A game might be a way in. But certainly, look, if I was picking an Edinburgh team for last week, it would have been Magnus at 8. So hopefully Ben Muncaster's performance has given Sean Everett a bit more of a kind of question about what they do going forward.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the makeup of that back row. Because you obviously got Hamish and Jamie, but Jamie probably has a bit of flexibility there. Hamish is a 7, and that's the shirt he'll wear. But there's maybe a bit more flexibility there. Yeah, interesting times. It was a nice thing. Sellout crowd on Friday night at the Hive. Stumel School beat Loreto in a curtain raiser, which is quite a nice thing. I think we're going to see that a bit more too. Getting the schools in and sort of showcasing that a wee bit. It is early, right enough, but it's definitely signs of Edinburgh engaging, and Glasgow have got a lot coming up, so it's a cool thing. South Africa, the women have landed. They've been training. They've got a day off tomorrow, so there'll be a fair few Instagram posts of coffee shops, no doubt, tomorrow. But excited for that one. The thought, how cool is it to be talking about Scotland could potentially go and retain a trophy?
Yeah, look, it's they hadn't won a trophy since 2001 before they won WXV2 last year. So, and what an opportunity off the back of 2 good wins against Wales and Fiji. That why not? And probably as the highest ranked team in WXV2, there's actually a bit of pressure on Scotland to say, this is yours to lose. And it's how really they cope with that pressure, because they don't really have that during the Six Nations. I think particularly when they play England and France, I think everybody kind of knows what the result's going to be. So I'm really interested to see how they get on. I think Italy's a good start because they'll know them so well from the Six Nations. But yeah, look, it's a good start, and we'll see how they go at the weekend.
I get what you mean, and I wonder, because Brian's spoken a wee bit about its performance, and this is probably the first time that a Scotland coach has really had to manage that favourites tag, I suppose.
Yeah.
You're beginning to scare the life out of me. You just look like a floating head. Go and turn the light on.
Yeah, the light switch, unfortunately, isn't completely the other end of the room. But yeah, I did realise I had sort of vanished.
It is frightening. I tell you what, the nights are fair drawn in.
I tell you what, the hour and a half for this.
Are you saving your pennies? Are you? I tell you what, times are tough.
I'm on the move to put the light on. Sadly, right. Let's see if that improves things.
Oh no! Turn it back off. So, no, I don't think I've hidden my admiration or adoration of Rachel Malcolm. I am still shocked that we're celebrating so few caps for some of these players, because it feels like they've been around forever, but they just don't play the number of internationals that the men play. So Rachel's going to pick up her 50th cap. Like she's got 150 caps worth of experience, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it feels like, back in the amateur day, the men's game, when players got 3 or 4 caps a season, and unfortunately that's probably the stage where the women's game is, in terms of they don't have enough test match experience. You think it's come now, but how many years has Rachel Malcolm played 4 games a season for Scotland? And I think that's where you've seen the kind of exponential growth in the women's game over the last probably 2 or 3 years, but since the last World Cup. But yeah, look, it seems mad to be talking about that she's only got 50 caps, or will get 50 caps, I imagine, at the weekend, because there's so many of them that, as you say, have been around since probably 2015, 2016, that it feels like they should have more.
The WXV model I like. I think it works for the women's game, because it's probably cheaper to bring everybody at one place. The venues, it's a right pain in the tonsils because there's very few supporters there. But I wonder how long it can last, or what the plan is. You may be able to tell me. I think I heard a bit of chat that there's the contracts for the venues are up after this one. So there's a chance the next WXV2 might not be in South Africa. It might be hosted somewhere else. But I kind of like it that it's grouped together. It's like a mini World Cup or World Trophy, 20s idea.
Yeah, I think without getting into the intricacies of how it's all done, because I think there are issues to sort out there. There obviously won't be a WXV next year, because this time next year we'll be right in the midst of the World Cup. So in 2026, I think they basically have said the contracts for the venues are up, and we may look at how we determine who plays where and all that kind of thing. So I think it is pretty up in the air, but I think in terms of being a driver for particularly Scotland's success, that was kind of the springboard to this team's progression over the last 12 months when they won it last year. So, look, I think from a Scottish point of view, it can only be looked at as a positive thing. I think there's bits about it that I don't like. For example, if you're relegated, you lose a spot for your it's not your union, but like, for example, if Scotland were relegated, the Six Nations teams would lose a WXV place. I think that needs to be looked at. I think, look, if Scotland win WXV2, you should have won a place in WXV1. And I think that all those things need fine tuning. But I think as a whole, it's been a really positive thing. And I think if we can get the tournaments in places where people are going to go along, that's got to be the next thing, because ultimately the crowds aren't really that great, which will be disappointing for everybody.
The timing's tough, because I would love, like I did with the 20s trophy, I went to that class. The quality of rugby wasn't that flash because of the opposition. You can only play what's in front of you, but it was a brilliant thing to be hosted in Edinburgh. The Hive's ideal. It's easy to get to pitch obviously means you can play 3 games in a day. It would be class to have WXV, but Scotland should be in the top tier, which then means the hive isn't big enough, because there's to host England, Black Ferns, France, whoever else ends up in that, because I think there's still a bit to happen between now and 2026, but the hive isn't big enough. But I didn't really want Scotland to be WXV too. but
yeah,
but
that's like catch-22 situation, isn't it? So yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of rugby to happen between now and the time they need to make WXV decisions. I think what is encouraging from a Scotland point of view again is that, I spoke to Matt Banahan yesterday, and he was saying basically we shouldn't be content to be 5th. I think if you start saying that 5th's an achievement, all of a sudden the teams behind you very, very quickly catch you up, and before you know it, you're 7th or 8th. And I think, to be looking at now the teams above them and say, right, well, we actually want to catch these teams is a massive mindset shift from where that team, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. If you almost felt like the achievement was to play and the outcome was secondary, whereas now it's all very much outcome based and it seems like they've kind of moved on and taken a few steps forward.
I think it's there was a CEO of Scottish Rugby, I think at one point said we're going to win the World Cup, and that, Ali McLeod did that in 1978 with the football team. There's those unreal. I think for Scotland to say we're not happy at 5th, that's fine, but the target is 4th. Like a realistic target is, what are we doing to become 4th? And if you become 4th, it's then right. It's not we're going to be number 1. It's what do we do to move one? Because it wasn't easy, but it was easier to move from 12 to 5.
Yeah.
But moving from 5 to 4, it's not impossible, but it's a lot tougher than jumping all those places. So I'm really interested to see what Scotland can do. And I hate this marginal gains thing. So I think everybody jumped on it and get to, but it's what do we do to become 4th? Who do we play? Who do we play in the hive in whatever month it is in the summer that's going to give us that chance to get up to 4th? Because the chances of us playing England more than the Six Nations are, I would think, nil. The chances of us playing the Black Ferns are probably pretty low. So it's what do we do against the rest? The rest, France potentially, but we're only going to play New Zealand or England in a competitive, organised competition test match.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. And I think it is about what they do with playing the rest, but also like this game in WXV against Australia is such a great marker for Scotland, because Australia have been in that sort of perennially 5th position for a while. That now, if Scotland can win that, I mean, it'll go a long way to probably them winning WXV again, but it'll also set the barometer for, okay, we are good enough to be definitely to be 5th and push towards that 4th place. I think, when I spoke to Matt Banahan, he was saying, look, it might take 3 or 4 or 5 years as the impact of professional contracts kicks in, but the strides they've taken to go from 12 to 5 in a year show that, and we've talked a million times about Emma Orr, Evie Gallagher, Alex Stewart, the players are there. It's now just putting all the other things in place to make sure that the whole package is together, and they can go and kind of kick on again.
Speaking of the whole package, big fella, I need to go. I've got a date. I'm off to the Hive to play in an inclusive game at Edinburgh Rugby Inclusive team in Bo'ness. So I've got my base layer on because I didn't want to get my elbows skint.
I thought you were going to tell me you were away to do more defensive homework after Murrayfield Wanderers result at the weekend.
I knew I wasn't getting away with that.
Absolutely no chance.
I wasn't getting away with that. Yeah, defensive coach has gone back to the drawing board and he's realised that he should just probably pipe down during the week and stop setting things up. So I'm away for a runabout, and I'm still a bit sore from my last runabout, so this could be interesting. So hopefully I'll make it through in one piece. But I'm excited to get to go and play on the Hive with a whole load of good folk, just showing that the game's for everybody.
Good. Well, listen, I'll let you go. You enjoy, and hopefully we'll catch up over the course of the weekend.
Yeah. So get yourself, and here's one for you, because there's an absolute belter of an article coming out tomorrow. An absolute belter by one of the guest scribes for Scotland Rugby News. So it's well worth the £12 for 12 months. Get involved. Subscribe now. There's loads going on. You can hear loads from Gavin tomorrow. You can hear from me too. Anyway, enjoy. Good to see you, big fella. Catch you next week. Cheers, folks. Look after yourself. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.